It is official. Joe Biden has dropped out of the presidential race. So what happens next? Who's going to take Joe Biden's spot? Will it be chaos at the Democratic convention? And what was the deal that was made behind the scenes? We're going to cover it all. It's Verdict with Senator Ted Cruz. Senator, you said 10 months ago, and I'm just going to let you bask in the glory of this moment, that you were right for the last 10 months. People said it was insane when we talked about it here on Verdict. You said Joe Biden was going to drop out of this race. He would not be the nominee. It is official. He has dropped out. Your initial reaction to that?
Well, listen, I'm not basking in anything because I think this adds an entire layer of risk, an entire layer of complexity to the election that I think is dangerous for the country. That being said, you're right. We predicted this 10 months ago. We predicted this last year when we did on this podcast on Verdict. The corporate media went nuts with it. There were multiple stories all over the place that basically said we were out of our minds, that this would never happen, that this was a wild-eyed conspiracy theory. Well, the conspiracy theory just came true. And I want to note also, we predicted it again the night of the presidential debate.
Yeah.
You and I did what we're doing now. We did an emergency pod immediately after the presidential debate. We put it out, and we said that night, what I said is this will go down in history as the most consequential presidential debate in U.S. history. And the reason is, I believe the result of it will be to remove Joe Biden from the ballot. The consequence of this debate is the wheels are ineluctably moving towards Joe Biden dropping out of the race. Again, people were highly skeptical when we said that the night of the debate. Well, today's the fruition. We are 106 days out from the presidential election. It has never happened in the history of our nation that one of the two major nominees has dropped out anywhere close to the general election as it's happened now. It's never happened that 106 days out, we have no idea for sure who the Democrat nominee will be. That is a big deal. That is terrifying for Democrats, but it is also exceptionally dangerous for Republicans. We're going to walk through all that today.
Yeah, it's shocking that it happened and what happened behind the scenes to force his hand. We're going to get into all that. I want to tell you real quick about our friends at Blackout Coffee. Right now, I don't need a strong cup of coffee. I'm pretty jacked up with what's happened in this news. But at 7 a.m. every morning when you got to get awake, I want a premium cup of coffee before I do my show. And Blackout Coffee is amazing. They are 100% America conservative company that is fighting for conservative values while selling an amazing product. And there's a lot of liberal woke coffee companies out there. Don't give your money to them and don't settle for an average cup of coffee every day. I get tons of notes from people that say the same thing every single week. Ben, I tried it. You're right. It's amazing. Now, I want you to save money and I want you to try Blackout Coffee. Go to blackoutcoffee.com/verdict and use the coupon code VERDICT. You're going to get 20% off your first order. Blackout Coffee is 100% committed to conservative values, from the sourcing of the beans to the roasting process, customer support and shipping. They embody true American values, and they accept no compromise on taste or quality. So be awake, not woke. That's blackoutcoffee.com/verdict. 20% off your first order. Use the promo code VERDICT, blackoutcoffee.com/verdict. All right, Senator, so let's start with what's happened over the last week. Democrats witnessed an incredible GOP convention. You and I were there.
Yep.
It's the most, I think, unity I've ever seen the Republican Party at a convention.
Undoubtedly.
And they were, I think, really concerned after the convention of a big bump. How do you reset a race? You get in your new candidate. And I think they clearly saw that. We saw the big five Democratic families and the media coalesce behind forcing him to get out. I think some sort of deal had to happen to make sure that Joe Biden and his family are going to be taken care of. Kamala Harris was the obvious choice. That's now who he's endorsed, and other Democrats seem to be jumping on board.
Well, listen, I think this was inevitable, as I said, as of the night of the debate. But I think the momentum of it accelerated, number one, with the assassination attempt on President Trump. Number two, with the very successful presidential convention we just had in Milwaukee. I think Democrats were in absolute panic. They were in panic earlier today, poll numbers came out of Michigan that had Trump leading Biden in Michigan by 7 points. You want to talk about something to put Democrats in cold sweats. If they're losing Michigan by 7 points, go ahead and pull the curtains down, roll up the rug, it's all over. That's why they did this. That would have happened regardless, even if the debate had been, even if the convention rather had been bumpy, even if Saturday in Butler, Pennsylvania had not happened, I believe we'd still have Biden out of the race. But the Democrats, we saw each of the major constituencies of the Democrat Party line up against Joe Biden and force him out. He did not want to go. He did not go willingly. But one after the other, starting with Democrats in Congress, Nancy Pelosi came out against him, Chuck Schumer came out against him, Hakeem Jeffries came out against him, and it was all self-interest. All the Democrats in Congress were looking at their polls saying, holy cow, we're about to lose, and they all lined up against him. But you also saw Barack Obama quietly coming out against him. He put out a quick tweet in support of him, but he also signed off on George Clooney representing Hollywood, abandoning him, saying, Joe, get out. We saw the corporate media uniformly pushing him out. We saw the donors pushing him out, and the pressure became too much to bear. One senator after another senator after another senator on the Democrat side. Biden didn't have a choice, but I will say it was very savvy of them to wait until after this convention.
Yeah.
But let's just first go with the news. So today, here's what Joe Biden put out this afternoon. This is the letter he put out. He tweeted it out. This screenshot is from 12:46 p.m. Interestingly enough, it had 95.9 million views already.
Yeah.
I just checked a minute ago. We're about 2 hours later. It was up to 161 million views. This is his resignation letter. And rather than you and me read it, which would be fine, but we'd have to say words that are demonstrably untrue, things claiming that Biden had actually done something well, that his record was something other than the train wreck it is, rather than you or me read it, I think we're better off engaging in a bit of schadenfreude. And so watching Jen Psaki on MSNBC read
Former White House press secretary.
Joe Biden's press secretary.
Yeah, having to carry the water.
And I got to say, look, since I said that there are a number of lies about his record, Jen Psaki is actually quite accomplished at reading lies. But for those of you watching this as a video pod, so this is one, we do this podcast 3 days a week. All three of them are on audio. Typically one a week is on video. This is one of the video and audio pods, and I will say, if you're listening on audio, I'd encourage you, go to YouTube and watch it on video, because to watch Jen Psaki's face, you cannot fully appreciate the agony without watching it as she's reading these words, and as we're watching the Democrat Party light itself on fire. Here, give a listen, give a watch.
We have breaking news here. President Biden has announced he will stand down from the race.
Stop for
I'm
a
going to
second.
read the statement here.
Her expression, which is actually frozen on the screen right now, she's about to cry.
Yeah, I mean, she's like, what has just happened to my world?
All right, go ahead and keep playing.
We also have Tim Miller, who's going to be joining us shortly. My fellow Americans, over the past 3.5 years, we have made great progress as a nation. Today, America has the strongest economy in the world. We've made historic investments in rebuilding our nation, in lowering prescription drug costs for seniors, and in expanding affordable health care to a record number of Americans. We've provided critically needed care to 1 million veterans exposed to toxic substances. Thank you so much. I'm just going to read off the paper here. Passed the first safety law in 30 years, appointed the first African-American woman to the Supreme Court, and passed the most significant climate legislation in the history of the world.
I mean, really? She just goes straight into it and is like totally lost. Like, what just happened to us?
Well, Joe Biden has suspended, as you and I predicted 10 months ago, as you and I predicted a month ago on the debate, and he will not be on the ballot. That has never happened before. You know, the closest analog is the 1968 Democrat Convention, which was in Chicago as well. That is the last time you had an incumbent Democrat president, in that case, Lyndon B. Johnson, not run for re-election. Now, Lyndon B. Johnson, why did he not run for re-election? A big part of it is he'd lost the support of the American people. He'd lost the support of Republicans, of independents, and Democrats. And when you lose all of them, there ain't nobody left. It was the middle of the Vietnam War. unlike Joe Biden, it was not that he was too old. It was just that he was physically worn down and tired, and he'd lost the American people. And so LBJ didn't run. And you want to talk about an incredibly contentious election. In that election, there was a guy named Robert F. Kennedy who was running. That tragically is the election cycle where Bobby Kennedy was assassinated in the course of the cycle, but he was for a period the rising star. You ended up having LBJ's vice president, Hubert Humphrey, got the nomination, but it was an incredibly close and contested race because you had a challenge from the left, and a challenge from the left over Vietnam, a chaotic convention, and outside you had rabid protesters engaged in violence and rioting. I think we may literally be seeing history repeating itself.
Let's talk about, and there's two aspects of what I'm about to ask you. Number one, we see early on, I think the front runner is Kamala Harris. We see people coalescing behind her. But the real question is, how did she get that support so quickly from this president? What is the deal that's being done behind the scenes? Was this the White House staffers making sure, hey, I want to stay in and keep my power. I have a better chance keeping it with Kamala than going with somebody else. All these people in jobs in and around Biden and Harris are like, hey, I can keep my power if she's the person. Or was it, hey, he's saying, okay, I trust you, Kamala, to take care of me, protect my son, possibly give out clemency or pardons that may be needed down the road. How did the sausage get made on this deal?
All right, let's go back to Biden's resignation letter. Put that back up there. If you look at the resignation letter, that when he put it out earlier today, he says, and I'm going to finish reading from where we cut off on Jen Psaki, it's been the greatest honor of my life to serve as your president, and while it has been my intention to seek re-election, the damn Democrats drove me out of office. No, he didn't say that. He says, I believe it is in the best interest of my party, notice his party first, and the country, for me to stand down and focus solely on fulfilling my duties as president for the remainder of my term. I will speak to the nation later this week in more detail about my decision. For now, let me express my deepest gratitude to all those who worked so hard to see me reelected. I want to thank Vice President Kamala Harris for being an extraordinary partner in all this work. And let me express my heartfelt appreciation to the American people for the faith and trust you have placed in me. Now, interestingly enough, in this resignation letter, you notice what he doesn't do.
I fully endorse.
He doesn't mention endorsement at all. He says, I want to thank Kamala Harris. And he's silent. Now, he puts that out, and I'm assuming when he puts that out, the powers that be in the White House and in the Democratic Party freaked the hell out.
Yeah, lost their minds.
Lost their minds, and so shortly thereafter, look at the tweet he put out as a follow-up. Like, it says something. Your resignation letter, it's kind of odd to need a follow-up.
And then a quick follow-up at that.
Very quick follow-up,
Yeah.
but there was enough time. That other one was 12:46. This is 1:13, so, time passed. And then he sends out another tweet. My fellow Democrats, I've decided not to accept the nomination and to focus all my energies on my duties as president for the remainder of my term. Notice that was in his letter.
Yep.
My very first decision as the party nominee in 2020 was to pick Kamala Harris as my vice president. And it's the best decision I've made. Today, I want to offer my full support and endorsement for Kamala to be the nominee of our party this year. Democrats, it's time to come together and beat Trump. Let's do this.
So, delayed reaction.
So, at this point, Kamala is clearly the front runner. Joe Biden is explicitly supporting her. In the time that followed, Bill Clinton came out in support of her. Hillary Clinton came out in support of her. Alex Soros has come out in support of her.
Alex, by the way, may be one of the most important actual endorsements because it's follow the money.
Well, and look, George Soros has been the most important donor behind not just the Democrat Party, but the radical leftists, the cultural Marxists, the anti-Semitic protesters on campus. Soros has been funding all of that. According to multiple reports, George Soros's mental condition and mental deterioration is at least where Biden's is, if not substantially worse. And it's the son, Alex Soros, is the one that's now making the decision. So understand, when Alex Soros tweets out that he's behind Kamala Harris, what he's saying is the money is behind Kamala Harris. You're going to see a lot of that. Now, Interestingly enough, there's some other Democrats who are not quick to get on board. So, for example, take a look at what Gavin Newsom tweeted. President Biden has been an extraordinary history-making president, a leader who has fought hard for working people and delivered astonishing results for all Americans. He will go down in history as one of the most impactful and selfless presidents. Thank you, Joe Biden.
Yeah, there's not much of an endorsement there, is there?
Whose name's not there?
Yeah, Kamala.
And interesting enough, now look, Gavin is not lacking in ambition.
That's a very PC way of putting it. I like that. He's like, let's go to the convention and let's have this thing out.
It'll be interesting. And by the way, earlier today, there was all sorts of chatter that Hillary Clinton was going to make a play for this. It is interesting that she and Bill came out very quickly and said, let's get behind Kamala. You're going to see lots of chatter. There are Democrats talking about wanting to have a, open convention, a sort of mini primary battle, have the delegates decide. Under DNC rules, initially the delegates will vote. It's being speculated that Biden will release his delegates and say, vote for whom you want. And there may be a process. They may do a process where Kamala runs and a handful of other people run and they have a first ballot. Under the DNC rules, the so-called superdelegates, those include things like governors, things like senators, they don't vote until the second ballot. So the first ballot is the actual elected delegates, and if they were elected to support Joe Biden and if they've been released,
they can do whatever they want.
They can do whatever they want. I think at the end of the day, there's going to be a little bit of noise. There's going to be a little bit of squawking. But I stand by my prediction from day one that there is one person and one person only for whom the Democrats will be willing to push Kamala Harris aside, and that is Michelle Obama. It doesn't appear right now that Michelle is willing to get in. Now, that could be an August surprise. We've got nearly a month until the Democrat convention.
Can we just talk horse trading so people understand what this is going to look like for the next 30 days behind the scenes? Delegates now have the power to pick who the president could be.
Yep. And by the way, why is that? Because the Democrat Party, look, they knew that Joe Biden was mentally incompetent. They knew a year ago. They ran him anyway. They had the voters, all the Democrat voters, come vote for him, even though they knew he was mentally incompetent, that he couldn't do the job now, he couldn't do the job then. But they wanted power. The only thing that changed is with the debate, it became untenable. The American people realized this guy is not capable of doing the job anymore. It was only because they feared they were going to lose that the Democrats have abandoned him. But the consequence of that is the Democrats were perfectly fine with Democrat primary voters being completely disenfranchised. You will not get to select the Democrat nominee.
Yeah, this person will be elected by no one in the public. It will all be done with horse trading that could happen behind the scenes.
A handful of elites, a handful of special interests, which actually is pretty typical of who the Democrat Party is.
Actually true.
I mean, the irony is that they engage in Freudian projection at an historic level where everything they accuse their opponents of is what they're doing. But Democrat primary voters will have no say in who the nominee is. It will be power brokers in Chicago.
So let's just paint behind the scenes so people understand the corruption that can come out of this. If you need delegates to get the nomination and you coalesce in smaller groups and then you go forward and say, hey, I'm so-and-so, I'm representing 35 people in this state, California. You can't win without us. I would like this, and this person would like this, and this person would like this, and this person would like this, and their kids would like these jobs in the White House. If you give us this, you get all of our votes. That is exactly what we've seen happen at state level. We've seen corruption happen in a way when they're replacing a seat. Hey,
Rod Blagojevich went to jail for basically selling a Senate seat. This
Right.
is going to happen now 100,000 times over. And by the way, put on top of that, the big labor unions and the big money players in the Democrat
This
Party.
will be so corrupt.
And the Sierra Club and the pro-abortion groups and all of the different. The Democrat Party today is a coalition of rent seekers, of people who make their money suckling off the teat of government. That's who they are. And it is all about power and influence. Many of them, the reason they were willing to back someone who was obviously not mentally competent to be president is because they all stayed in power. Now, suddenly Joe Biden is going to be gone. And so they're all desperately scrambling, how do I keep my power? And we're going to see that play out. What I think will happen at the end of the day, I think Number one, the Democrats are too much of racial and gender bean counters to push an African-American woman aside for a white guy. So anyone looking at Gavin Newsom or anyone else, I just don't think that's going to happen.
Yeah, I agree.
That's why I think Michelle Obama is the only person who could push her aside, and at least right now it does not seem Michelle is trying to do that. If it's not Michelle, I think we will see Kamala Harris, and I think the real battle is going to be who the VP is.
I want to ask you about the VP, but before we get to that, is it fair to say that this might be the most corrupt picking of a presidential candidate in modern political history because of the time that people have to build their power and to basically, in essence, sell their vote?
Perhaps. Now to be fair, it hasn't happened yet, but it's all going to be behind closed doors. It's not going to be the voters. It's not going to be in public. It's one thing if you campaign. Look, at some level, you could say all campaigns are in a way about buying votes. If you campaign and say, I'm for Medicare for all, for socialized medicine.
Sure.
You're saying the Democrats are big on being the Santa Claus party. We'll give you free stuff if you vote for us. That's one thing.
On a different level.
It's a totally different if you make a public promise in the press that I will support a law that has broad effect. You know, Joe Biden, I'm going to give away $1 trillion to people who have student loans.
Yeah, vote for me. I'm buying your vote.
That is very different from, Ben, you control a pocket of votes. You ever thought of being Secretary of the Navy?
Yeah.
You like votes.
Yeah. Or I hear there's a great house in this country and the ambassadorship there is really fun.
I mean, we're going to see that happening every day. Now, mind you, you're going to get competing people making those promises.
Yeah.
And in terms of the vice president, that's going to be part of the negotiation is who Kamala teams up with to try to lock down the power brokers in the Democrat Party. And one question is, does she try to quickly buy off whoever she thinks her most formidable adversary is? Possibly. Does she try to get all of the potential adversaries to compete wooing for her affection? More likely. But it's going to take an entire month playing out for us to see.
Well, and can you promise someone the vice presidency so they don't challenge you? That's the question I want to ask you next. But first, I want to tell you about my friends over at Chalk. If Joe Biden would have just taken some chalk, he might still be in this race. You never know. I can tell you, Chalk is incredible. It is a supplement that can help you get back what you've lost when it comes to your energy, your focus, your mood. I have been using Chalk now for over a year. I've been working out again. I've lost a significant amount of weight, and I feel like I'm no longer just fatigued, sitting around wishing I could go back out there and work out. Chalk, CHOQ, they are helping real American men just like you take back and proudly maximize your masculinity. How do they do it? By boosting your testosterone levels up to 20% over 90 days. Now, I said it again, I've been taking Chalk's Male Vitality Stack for over a year now, and it works. Manufactured right here in the US of A, Chalk's natural herbal supplements are clinically proven to have game-changing effects on your energy, your focus, your mood. So, if you're tired of sitting around on the couch, maximize your masculinity today. Go to chalk.com. Use the promo code BEN for a massive discount on any subscription for life. chalk.com. Promo code BEN for lifetime savings. Limited time offer. Subscriptions are cancelable at any time and boost your testosterone levels up to 20% over 90 days. Let's talk about VP. Forget what we just went through. Holy crap. Somebody who was never on a ballot, that had no one's ever voted for vice president, is all of a sudden going to become the vice president of the United States of America, possibly, certainly will be the nominee for the Democratic Party. How do they pick? I don't think a lot of people understand this. Like, it's confusing enough picking the now Kamala Harris or whoever it's going to be, but let's say it is Kamala. It's a little bit more orderly. How the hell are we going to get the vice presidential pick from the Democratic Party? How does that work?
Look, they're going to decide who brings the most to the ticket. Often you look at geographic concerns. Will someone put a state into play? Will someone be beneficial? Sometimes you look to things like, is someone a great fundraiser? Will they bring a bunch of donors? Will they bring other interest groups on board? Sometimes you look to neutralize someone who's a potential opponent. In this instance, I think the Democrats are 100% about race and gender. It's how they think. It's how they're wired. They don't look at individuals.
It's DEI.
So it is DEI. I think the VP nominee will be a boring white guy. That's
So-
my prediction, and they actually have a number of boring white guys, so
Yeah.
so they have a broad
They have
array
a broad
to pick
pool.
from.
So who picks it? Is it the person who gets the nomination?
Yeah, it's
or is
Kamala.
it so there's no voting by the delegates, so
No,
people
no,
understand
no.
the process.
It will be. My guess is Kamala will announce who her VP is going to be before they vote. It could conceivably be afterwards. It depends if there's a real contested battle.
At the convention.
Then maybe she doesn't announce it until after she's the nominee. Typically, the way it happens is the nominee is sewn up before the convention. It's been a long time since we've had a contested convention, and there's been uncertainty as to who the nominee is going to be.
If the vote is really contentious and it's a drag out knockdown at the convention, you're saying there's a legit possibility that whoever comes away with it will barely survive that. They get the nomination. They say, hey, in a week or two, I'll tell you who my VP is going to be?
No. I think it would be at the convention.
Okay.
I think it would be immediately thereafter. And if there is a real fight, I mean, one thing that has happened, you could go to whoever's number two and say, look, I'll make you VP if you drop out and endorse me, and that could be how you lock up the votes. I don't think it'll come to that. I actually think people will coalesce around Kamala more quickly than that.
Who's the front runner then right now in your mind? I mean, obviously this could change in a couple weeks, but if Kamala is
I'm going
the person,
I'm going to give you two names.
and why?
Josh Shapiro.
Okay, and tell people that don't know Josh who he is.
He is the governor of Pennsylvania. He is widely perceived as a moderate. He is Jewish. Was attorney general in Pennsylvania. I think what is compelling is, number one, Shapiro has strong polling numbers in Pennsylvania. If the Democrats can win Pennsylvania, the path to Trump winning becomes much, much harder. He's also perceived as a moderate, and I think actually naming a Jewish Democrat would help tamp down some of the
anti-Semitic that they've been dealing with the last several months.
Yes, and so I think all of that, if you're sitting there around Kamala, that's attractive. A second choice that I think is also very attractive as a VP is Mark Kelly. Mark Kelly is senator from Arizona.
Yeah.
Mark Kelly is a Navy veteran. Mark Kelly is a former astronaut. He's been to space.
He's also got a fame factor to him.
Yeah, and Mark Kelly is also affable, and he seems reasonable. He doesn't seem crazy. When you talk with him, I like Mark Kelly personally. He's like a Joe Manchin. It won't be Joe Manchin, but he's someone who his affect, his demeanor is very affable. And if you met him on the street, you wouldn't think the guy was a Democrat. You wouldn't think that he voted with a loony left on almost everything because he seems like a normal guy. I think that would be very attractive. In Arizona, it is not as vital a swing state as Pennsylvania. It doesn't have nearly as many electoral votes. But Arizona is certainly a battleground state, and Mark Kelly on the ballot could help. I would put those two as the top two.
I got to ask then, where's Gavin Newsom? Is he number 3? If you're going for a white guy.
So
I mean, the argument they would say is, some would say is he brings California, but the reality is
get California
they got
anyway.
California anyway. Exactly.
So if they go Gavin Newsom, it's a combination of two things. One, money.
Okay.
And Newsom's got a bunch of donors who love him, who will write checks. And California is the ATM of the Democrat Party. And so now Kamala is a Californian, so she's got a lot of that money behind her also.
But it neutralizes him too, right? Wouldn't that be the perk? Because then she didn't have to worry about him in 4 years?
Potentially, although she doesn't worry about him in 4 years. If she's the incumbent president, he's not going to primary her. If she gets this and gets elected, Newsom doesn't get to run for 8 years. That's just it.
That's how it's going to work.
Knocks that down the road. Look, Newsom, I think, is perceived as too liberal. My guess is they're not going to be that worried about money. And the other reason you would go with Newsom is he's talented. I mean, he is a snake oil salesman par excellence. He's a communicator. He's slick. He'd be
a great campaigner because people would show up to see him in the Democratic Party. That's important too, right? I mean, you have an event and your VP is popular. That's good for your campaign.
Look, and in many ways, he would overshadow Kamala. It reminds me. Back in the 1988 election, I remember Saturday Night Live was making fun as we were getting really close to the election, and you had George Bush and Dan Quayle, and look, people had ridiculed Dan Quayle enormously, and so what SNL did is the ballots, as the parties have requested they be printed, And the Republican side had Bush in giant letters and Quayle in tiny little letters. And then on the Democrat side, you had Michael Dukakis, who rode in a tank with a helmet and looked ridiculous.
Yes.
And then Lloyd Bentsen, who was the Texas senator, who was moderate, well-received, was going over well. SNL did the ballot of Dukakis, tiny little letter, and Benson.
Yeah. That
One
could happen
thing
with Kamala.
Kamala could be worried about is the risk that Gavin would overshadow her, and that's why I think Shapiro or Kelly are more likely. I'd be surprised. I don't think she needs the money, and I think the downside she would perceive as greater.
All right, let's talk about the media, because what we're going to see right now, and this is my biggest concern. You and I talked about this in Milwaukee. If Biden dropped out, now it's Biden has dropped out. It's a complete reset of this presidential campaign. The polls, and I want to be very clear to our audience, this is my opinion. I don't know if you agree with me or not. I want to know your take on it. Are completely meaningless and worthless right now.
Correct.
The only poll that's going to matter is the first poll after we find out who the Democrats actually pick.
No, even that poll's not going to matter. And listen, this is something you and I talked about in our last podcast. We did 2 podcasts live from the convention. I love the convention. It was a blast. It's the best Republican convention I've ever seen. More unity than I've ever seen. However, I was very worried at the convention, and I expressed this to you at the time, which is I am afraid people were overconfident at the convention. There was an air of celebration.
Yeah.
It was, we've won. We're on to victory. This is a landslide. Trump's coming back in. We've got a huge Republican majority. You heard people talking about it, 55, 56 Republican senators, huge Republican House. Like people were planning, people were talking about, all right, who's going to be Secretary of State? Who's going to be Secretary of Defense? Like they're handing out.
Already moved on.
Yeah.
We won, and now what's next? And that's not the case.
And my view, and I was trying to say this, is look, there's a time for celebration. Celebrate after Election Day. Celebrate after we've won. Now is not the time for celebration. Now's the time for hard work. Now's the time for rolling up your sleeves and going to win. And my assumption is coming out of the convention, Republicans will get a little bounce. You know, historically, it's about 4 points is what you get out of your convention. I think it was a strong convention, so let's assume that happens. The Democrats, and I will give them credit for one thing, their timing of releasing it right after the convention. Perfect timing to do this because it resets the whole race. It almost doesn't matter what the bounce was out of the convention. And here's the problem. For the next month, all of the news is going to be dominated by who the Democrat is going to be. The Democrats are about to have a month-long convention. Instead of a week, why do you get a bounce out of a convention? You get a bounce out of a convention because you have 4 days of driving the news, the earned media every night of your people on TV pitching all of the benefits of your nominee, all the benefits of your record, all the benefits of your agenda. Instead of a 4-day convention, the Democrats are about to have a month-long convention where every news story will be focused on who the nominee is going to be. And they're also going to be doing a combination of, number one, praising Biden. You know, it's not graceful to, he's on his way out. People don't want to criticize him anymore.
They're going to say he did this for America.
He's historic. He's one of the greatest presidents in the history of the universe. I mean, you're going to hear all of that effusively. And then they're going to talk about what an historic president Kamala Harris would be. And it's going to be a month long. We're going to see
I would argue multi-billion-dollar in-kind contribution.
And by the way, Republicans, I worry, vastly underestimate Kamala Harris. That they don't think very highly of her. They don't think she's terribly bright. When you or I bring up Kamala Harris's name in Republican circles, people laugh. It's immediately a punchline. I think people are underestimating what billions of dollars of free media, of the entire corrupt corporate media complex, pitching her as a combination of Mother Teresa, Oprah, and Gandhi. I mean,
and save the party. It's going to be
and young and vibrant, and it's historic. Now, I still think Trump wins in November. But this is not a layup. It is not given. And what's coming in front of us, look, if you're a Democrat, what makes you nervous is chaos. And this much chaos 100 days out is scary. But you know what? Even more scary is going to an election where you're almost certain to lose, which is where Biden was. So from their perspective, let chaos and a chance to win or certain loss, they'll take chaos. But Republicans need to understand just how dangerous this is.
It's all perspective in life, and I said this earlier. It's like you're on the greatest cruise ship in the world, and that cruise ship's going down, and a crappy little fishing boat shows up, and it saves your life. You love that crappy fishing boat the rest of your life. It doesn't matter how bad it looks, how ugly it was. You just got your life saved, and that's Kamala Harris. Like, not a good candidate when she ran.
So I feel confident that you do not have a career as a Democrat politics ad maker. I can see the ad now. Kamala Harris, the crappy fishing boat to save your life.
To save your life. But it's perspective. I mean, that's what they're dealing with.
I'm not sure that fits on a bumper
I know,
sticker.
right? But she didn't even make it. I mean, I go back to when she was running.
She got 0 delegates.
Correct. And she was a terrible candidate. But when you're now in the position of that boat sinking and I'm the only one doesn't have a hole in the boat, I'm pretty appealing to everybody on that boat. And I love you, and I'm willing to swim to you, and I'm willing to hug you and kiss you and say thank you for saving my life. It's all perspective, and that's what the media is going to do to her, is say she just saved us from guaranteed defeat. She is a savior to the Democratic Party. We love her, and they're all going to be energized. That terrifies me.
Yeah, energized, and once she's the nominee, unified. One thing to keep in mind, people are focused on, money, and Trump has a money advantage. Put yourself in the mindset of a Democrat gazillionaire, of a Democrat activist, of a Democrat union boss, of a Democrat special interest leader. A week ago, you were depressed, you were demoralizing, you were contemplating America run by Hitler. And by the way, if you're one of those people, you think Donald Trump is Adolf Hitler.
Yeah.
Like you were just, I don't even know if I want to show up and vote. It's terrible. It's horrible. And now, to go back to the sinking cruise ship, you've been thrown a lifeline. I think we're going to see jubilation on the Democrat side. That's dangerous, too. Jubilation?
Yeah. What
What happens is donors pull out their checks, and they write really big checks when they're
massive.
Jubilant. What happens is activists go, and they work harder. They turn more people out. And that, particularly if the Republicans are overconfident, we cannot be overconfident. That combination is dangerous. And you know what it reminds me of? Potentially, I hope this is not right, but it reminds me of a few years ago, the A&M versus Alabama game. Now, I was there at the A&M versus Alabama game. Alabama at the time was the #1 team in the country.
You had me at sports analogy. I'm all in now.
A&M had started off as a top 25 team. It had a good team, but it had lost 2 games in a row.
Yep.
To opponents it wasn't supposed to lose. I think maybe Mississippi State.
Yeah, it was bad.
It was bad. And so we came into the game, and I was there in College Station. And I remember saying to my buddies I was at the game with, I said, you know what? I think A&M has a real chance to win this game because I think Alabama's feeling like we're the #1 team in the country, and these A&M guys suck. Look, they're losing to teams that are not contenders. This is easy. We're playing a junior high team. And I think the Aggies were pissed off, or they were at Kyle Field, and they were defending their home, and they were mad because everyone was dismissing them as a joke, and they're like, wait a second, we're a top-tier football team, and they ended up winning that game. It was awesome. 41-38 was the final score. Kyle Field erupted. I don't want to see the Democrats playing the role of A&M in that dynamic, and so my message to Republicans is do not behave like this is in the bag because that's one of the easiest ways to ensure it's not in the bag.
I want to ask you a strategy question on if you are the Trump team, what do you do when you just start acting like you're running against Harris? Before you answer that, I want to tell you about our friends over at Preborn and the incredible work that they are doing and how you can get involved. Preborn is an organization that fights for unborn children. How do they do this? Preborn's networks of clinics shine the bright light in the darkest corner of our country, where abortions take place thousands of times a day. If we can help protect these children, it is so important that we make sure that their heartbeat, their voices are heard. How do they do this? Preborn introduces mothers to their precious preborn babies through ultrasound. Ultrasound is an incredible tool where a mother can hear the heart of their baby. This combination leads to Preborn saving over 280,000 babies to date. What they do is they pay for those ultrasounds. Your donation of $28 sponsors one ultrasound, and it's critical for the battle for life. So let's join together and save as many lives and heartbeats as possible. Introducing mothers to their child's heartbeat. Please donate, and it's easy. Just dial pound 250 and say the keyword baby. That's pound 250, say the keyword baby. Or go to preborn.com/verdict. That's preborn.com/verdict and help save a baby today. That's preborn.com/verdict, sponsored by Preborn. Senator, if you are Donald Trump, you now know that Biden is gone. The number one question that the campaign's got to ask is, how do you campaign against somebody for the next month that you don't know who it's going to be?
So, look, I'd say 40% you campaign against Kamala Harris, you assume it's Kamala. And 60% you campaign against the Democrats' record. And I will say I've been concerned in recent weeks and months that we've spent too much time attacking Joe Biden for his mental diminishment and not enough time making the case, as you and I often do, that the Biden-Harris Democrat record has been a train wreck. And I say Democrat record because it's not just Joe Biden, it's Kamala Harris, and it's every single Democrat in Congress, every Democrat senator, every Democrat House member. They voted repeatedly in favor of the spending and the debt that is causing inflation. They voted repeatedly in favor of Biden's war on oil and gas and energy that is causing energy prices to skyrocket. They voted repeatedly in favor of open borders that's endangering our families across this country. They voted repeatedly in favor of letting violent criminals out of jail that is, again, endanger our families. They voted repeatedly in favor of appeasing our enemies and undermining our allies. And so from the Trump's campaign, I would assume it's Kamala, but also make the broader point it is their agenda that has failed the American people. The classic question in any election, are you better off now than you were 4 years ago? It doesn't matter what fill-in-the-blank Democrat they drop into that slot. They're going to be defending the same disastrous failed record. And so I hope the Trump campaign, and I hope Republicans generally, make that case substantively on the merits.
It's going to be interesting. We're going to cover it all. Make sure you share this podcast with your family and friends. Share the video on social media from YouTube. It's also up on Facebook. You can share it there as well so that you can have other people hear what we were saying here today. When this type of news breaks, we do a podcast as fast as we can. It's an emergency pod. Yes, sir.
Let me make a final statement.
I like this.
I'm going to place the odds that Joe Biden pardons Hunter Biden at 100.0%. Hunter Biden will get a pardon as a result of this decision today. It will not happen until after Election Day.
That's what I was going to ask. When's it happen?
He's not going to do it. He's not going to do it before Election Day, but he's going to stick around. And after Election Day, I believe it is now 100% that Joe Biden will pardon Hunter.
I have a feeling that might be part of our next show. It might be. Don't forget, we do this Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Hit that subscribe, auto download button. The Senator and I will see you back here in a couple of days.